Today's author panel is part of our Fairytale and Folklore Festival, which is made possible in part by funding from the Minnesota Department of Education through a Library and Services Technology Act grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That's a lot of words. That basically boils down to, we had help paying for all the cool stuff we're doing this summer for this event. And that help came from our state government, part of it that's in charge of education, and part of it that helps out various libraries and museums. This also means that we send out an evaluation in your email at the end of the event. And if you could please take a minute to fill out that survey, that helps us show that we did what we said we would do with their money. And that means next year we're more likely to get more money for more awesome events. So it's really helpful if you can keep an eye on your email afterwards to do that kind of thing. Also, the festival is more than just today's event. We've had several events last month, and we have several events coming up this month. Next Tuesday, the 14th at 7 p.m., Jessica Day George is talking. And the Wednesday immediately following that, if you're here in Waseca, we're doing a story walk. It'll be based around Beauty and the Beast, and it's on Doodlebug Trail. And every Friday morning this month, we're doing a fairy tale book club. We still have room, so if you would like to join that, just get in contact with us. We'll get you the book, and we'll be happy to see you. And then also starting this Friday, we have we're so excited, we have 2 sessions on Friday afternoons for a ukulele sing-along. And it'll happen every Friday this month and next month. And then the last one I want to talk about is on Wednesday, the 22nd of this month, we have Renee Adia. She's more of a young adult author, so for some of our young kids, this might be for your older siblings, but she's great. We're really excited to talk to her. Okay, I think that's all the various housekeeping matters. Now it's time to talk to our authors. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? You've muted yourself, Adam.
Sorry. Yes, I'm happy to introduce myself. My name is Adam Gidwitz. I'm the author of books like A Tale Dark and Grim, which is based on the real Grimm fairy tales, which, as some people, most of you may know, are in fact quite scary and quite dark. So this is a retelling of those stories. I'm also the author of The Inquisitor's Tale, which won a Newbery Honor in 2016. And it's about 3 children and a holy dog who have an epic adventure across medieval France. It takes place in 1242. And there are things like, holy dogs and haunted forests and a dragon that kills people by farting on them, all based on medieval legends and folklore. So yes, a dragon with deadly farts, real medieval legend, which I'm happy to talk about. And I'm currently working on a series called the Unicorn Rescue Society. The 5th book just came out in that series. This is the 5th book, and they're all co-written with authors from the cultures that this group visits. So they go and rescue mythical creatures around the world. So that's the Unicorn Rescue Society. So that's me. Adam Gidwitz.
Donna?
I'm Donna Jo Napoli. I'm much older, and I've been at this a very long time. I have over 80 books that I've published, and a lot of them are folk tales and fairy tales. But like Adam, I love to set them in a real historical context. So I do a lot of historical research on my books. Lately, I've been working very much on straight historical fiction. So my book that is just about to come out, this is an ARC, an advanced reader copy, is called In a Flash. And it's about 2 little Italian girls, the children of the cook in the Italian embassy in Tokyo during World War II. And when Italy changed sides in the war, suddenly they became the enemy. So it's about what happened to them. And it's seeing World War II from a side that American literature has not paid much attention to.
That's awesome. Wait, can I ask a follow-up question? That sounds so good. So can you give us a little hint of what happened? I mean, I don't know spoilers, but
yeah,
how does it change for them?
Everything changes. The government representatives come into the embassy, and the ambassador and family go off to an internment camp where they put European scholars and government people like that. But the father goes off to prison, and the little girls wind up having an episodic experience for years. It's quite, I am a complete pacifist, and it shows in the book. I don't hold back on the sorts of things that happen to them.
Okay.
Wow, amazing.
That sounds really cool.
Can I ask another follow-up question? Could we just talk? I mean, it seems like that's so fascinating. I mean, I don't want to get in the way, but that's such a great topic for a book. And I've just started work on a book that also takes place in World War II. And I'm wondering whether, Donna Jo, when were you inspired to write this? Was it because of current events or a long-term plan?
Well, you know, even though I write a lot, I'm pretty slow on finishing a book. So I visited Japan in 2007, and I walked by the Italian embassy, and suddenly in my head, there was what happened to all of them in World War II. And so I read and read and read and read and read. And I wrote versions of it and sent them to Japanese friends, and got lots of feedback. But it was very difficult actually to find a publisher who was willing to present something that showed the enemy that we have presented as so horrendous, to show them as really suffering during the war, and to show that America, in war, nobody's kind to anybody, and America was not kind to anybody either. So it took a while, but Wendy Lamb at Random House is brave.
And brilliant.
Yay, Wendy.
Great. What an incredible editor and publisher she is.
Yeah. Wendy has stepped back a little bit now, and Dana Carey is handling work. And Dana is also a very brave soul. So I don't know how the book will be received, but I needed to write it.
That's a perfectly valid reason to write a book.
Maybe the best reason.
Yeah. So you tell me, because you're very different from me. I have never tried to create a world. That is, my fairy tales, when I have told fairy tales and folk tales, I treat the fairy tale as this object up here on a pedestal. And I'm very, very true to the details that are given, which are usually very few. You know, fairy tales are usually a couple of pages or whatever, but I make sure I use them. Actually creating your own. I've done that with contemporary fiction, but I've done that with historical fiction, sort of, but I haven't done that with a fairy tale. What's it like creating your whole world?
Well, actually, to be honest, I don't feel, maybe you would say that I have, but I don't feel like I ever really have either. You know, I make myself feel better about this by, you know, the fact that Shakespeare stole all of his plots from other plays and history books that he was reading and things like that. And I feel it's so hard for me to write a plot and to create a world. I almost never do. So, I mean, this takes place in the kingdom of Grimm, and every chapter is based on a Grimm fairy tale that Ms. Brianna and Donna Jo, I'm sure you both have read most of or all of the fairy tales. I mean, so Unicorn Rescue Society is sort of the most original. It takes place in our world, but the creatures are based on the mythology of a real mythology of these cultures. So, for example, in the fifth book, they go to Cuba, and the book is co-written by Emma Otegi, who is an author friend of mine. You know Emma?
Emma was my student.
No.
Yes, Emma was my student at Swarthmore College, and she took writing for children with me.
You
And
taught her very well.
Then she graduated, and for 2 years, every other week, 2 times a month, Emma sent me her writing, and I gave her feedback.
Amazing.
And it was a wonderful experience for both of us. Yes, I love Emma.
Well, thank you for giving her all that guidance, because it shows up.
Fantastic to start. I
Yeah.
take no credit.
You have to, but you should take some. Anyway, so the Madre de Aguas, this creature that you see on the cover, is a Cuban and in fact sort of pan-Caribbean creature who takes a lot of different forms. And so we explore the sort of different mythologies behind it while telling like a funny, zany story. So like you, I tend not to make things up. In fact, right now with the World War II novel that I'm writing, which takes place in England and in Germany, the hardest part I'm coming up with is the plot. The insane characters, the ideas, the emotions. I know what that all is. I know what the sort of big reveal at the end is that's going to sort of make your jaw drop and then hopefully make you cry a little bit. But why it starts, the MacGuffin, the sort of beginning of the story, I'm so lost right now. I've got piles of books on Nazi Germany and England right now, and it's hard. It's tough. Making up stuff is hard.
You will find your plot. Yeah, I think you're right. The way you've been talking, I'm very much like you. I share that approach, and I think it's because it's the way I write.
Go ahead. Your sound cut out for just a second, but you're back.
You're back.
Sorry. That is my first drafts. I don't have my plot at all. And I just go, and I'm meeting my characters and understanding them and letting it flow. And it's like blood. It's just bleeding, and I love writing a first draft. But then you have to write a second draft, and that's where you put in you make sure your plot is working and making sense. And that's the structure, that's the bones. Without the bones, your story can't walk around. But your reader is bloodthirsty, and I don't think that you can put it, I don't think I can't put in the blood afterwards. If I've already got the structure, what's the point of writing the story for me? I kind of have to discover it as I go, and things have to happen because some character needed to do something. So I totally agree with you. You're going to find your plot.
It's very inspiring that you say that. It is challenging because I get scared before I write a book. And so this is my 10th book that it just came out, and I always plot it beforehand, sometimes down to the page.
Uh-huh.
And because the emotions, I know what they are, and so they do come out. But maybe this time I should try it your way and just sort of let it bleed. And then, because I do have some major structural points that I know what I want to hit. It does help to have a catalyst, and I haven't quite gotten that one yet.
Yeah. If you lined 10 writers up and asked them how they write, you'd get 10 different answers.
Yes, you would. And in fact, if you asked them about each of their books, you would probably, at least for me, I have to have a different approach for every book I write. I mean, I hear people say that on panels all the time, but it's certainly true. This one had to be different from Unicorn Rescue, had to be different from Inquisitor's Tale. Just didn't, the old structure didn't work for the new subject or story.
Mm-hmm.
I was once on a panel with Lois Lowry, and she does exactly what you do. She outlines everything beforehand and outlines within every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, all different.
Lots of different ways to write. It's nice to hear that everyone's a little bit different. I do have a series of questions. I enjoyed listening to you guys ask questions back and forth, but I do have a couple of questions that I was planning on asking. The one that I want to do right now is, a lot of times creativity is pulling ideas from different places together and mixing them all up. What is something that inspired you unexpectedly? Like, you're like, well, that's a weird thing, but that just, like walking by the Italian embassy in Tokyo. That's kind of an odd place to get inspired, but there you go.
Donna Jo, you want to take that first?
I'm odd in terms of, Brianna sent us the questions yesterday, but I never read questions ahead of time
That's
because
fine.
I like to be spontaneous.
Mhm.
I wish I had read that one ahead of time.
I would say you already answered it because you said you walked by the Italian embassy in Tokyo. And
Okay.
that is
There you
not
go.
where I would expect a story to come from, but you have a whole book from that. So there you go. You
Your
already answered.
turn, Adam.
Okay, great. So it's the question is sort of when did something unexpectedly inspire you, and how does that actually work?
Yeah, sure.
For me, it's usually hearing a cool story, and often it is through travel. So the Inquisitor's Tale is sort of a collection. It doesn't read like a collection; it reads like a novel. Whereas A Tale Dark and Grim is more episodic. Inquisitor's Tale reads like a novel, and yet it actually came out of just a collection of the craziest things that I heard and learned um, in the year that I lived in Europe. My wife is now a professor of medieval history, but for 10 years she was getting her master's and her PhD in medieval history. And so I got to essentially be her research assistant / bag carrier for those 10 years. Every time we went to a museum, I would take the photos of things, and we would go on tours. We would talk to other graduate students and to professors and scholars. We would go to archives, and we would sit in archives, and she would get a book that was 1,000 years old and start to flip through it, and I would sort of look over her shoulder. And over the course of that decade, just crazy, you just hear the most amazing things, like the life of Saint Martha, written down in 1263 in the Golden Legend. It's a collection of saints' lives. I've probably got it on the shelf here somewhere. The life of Saint Martha, she has to go fight a dragon, and it says whenever anyone attacks this dragon, it, quote, turns and casts behind it its ordure, and whatever it toucheth burneth like fire. So as I interpreted that means it farted, and when it hit you, you burst into flames. And then I recently made a very unpleasant discovery, and I'm so embarrassed about it, but I'm going to admit it. I assumed ordure was an old-fashioned way of saying odor, but it isn't. It means poop. So it actually poops on you, and then you burst into flames, and that's even worse. So I'm glad, I guess, I went with the farts in the book. So things happen like that where you are, or we were walking, we went to Mont Saint-Michel, the incredible monastery that sits on an island off of the coast of Normandy or Brittany, depends on whether you ask a Norman person or a Britain person. And when the tide comes in, up until recently, you couldn't get there. There was no causeway. You only had to wait until the tide went out, and then you could walk there. But what most people don't know, and I didn't know until we visited, was that the sand that surrounds Mont Saint-Michel has beds of quicksand. And so we had a guide take us, and we got to sink in the quicksand up to our shins and crawl out on our elbows and stuff. It was insane. And so things like that, these things keep happening. And when one happens, you say, maybe I should put that in a book, that in a book. And I just take notes on all of those things, and I usually sort of clump them. I think this book I was thinking was going to be about saints, which it was. And so eventually I say, okay, now I'm ready to sit down and try to put all of those saints ideas, as I thought of them, into order. And so I saw, in fact, that somebody asked in the chat, what does it look like when you have a page-by-page outline? And I just happened to find it. So I'm going to show you because it finishes this little story here. Oh, I can't screen share. Would you like me to be able to screen share if you want to?
I should be able to fix that. Give me just a second.
It's kind of amazing doing a panel like this on your computer because I'm never able to do this.
Yeah.
But we could try. And if we can't, no big deal. But anyway, maybe Donna Jo, you have something that you want to say in response to what I said while Brianna figures out whether I'm allowed to screen share or not.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about our young readers, our young audience out there. And I want to say a couple of things. Both Adam and I have done a lot of traveling, and both of us do a lot of research in books. And you might be someone who doesn't have the opportunity to travel, and you might be someone who doesn't always find library research exciting. What I want to say is, I grew up in a very poor family. We never traveled anywhere, but I was always telling stories. And I think that you don't want to discount other possible sources for stories. There are stories all around you. You see an old woman sitting on a bench with a bag and a bus comes. Well, she leaves, but what if she left the bag behind? And what was in it? Or you see a bird dive bombing another bird. And why? All around you, there are sources for stories. It's a question of what matters to you. It must matter to you. If you're writing a scene, you walk all around it and look for the perspective that makes your heart beat. If you don't find that, don't write that scene. You must care desperately about what you're writing about in order to have a chance of making your reader care. But you can make your reader care about the tiniest things if you understand their import, if they matter to you. Mm-hmm. So don't get discouraged or frightened by the fact that we're at this point in our lives doing this sort of thing. You, at whatever point in your life, can write.
Mm-hmm. Also, at whatever point in your life you can learn. I wish that I could take a class with Donna Jo Napoli on writing right now. I'll flatter you just for 1 second. After I've been writing now for 10 years, or publishing books for 10 years. And after 10 years, and I've had a lot of the success that I've wanted to have. I feel good about where my career is. And when that's a dangerous position to be in, because you start to think you know what you're doing. And I think you know what you're doing and you're good at what you do. But there are so many other ways, as we've just been saying, to get into a problem, to solve a problem, to write a book. And that I can get stuck because I'm like, well, I've figured out the ways I want to do things. So if I could just have, maybe Donna Jo, just like 10 or so 2-hour classes with you, that's all. I think it would really help me sort of advance, my craft, get better at what I like to do, which is writing and telling stories.
Well, thank you. That's incredibly sweet of you.
Here's this outline that I'll show you guys, which I think will maybe will show you sort of how things evolved in the book. I'm not positive, but it'll be interesting, I think. Let's see if maybe that's right. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this starts with sort of, I know Jean is the girl, Gwenfort is the dog, and I kind of had an idea for a first line, which didn't end up in the book. You changed so many things. Mm-hmm. In the beginning was the dog. It was a good dog. And I was making a joke about in the beginning from the Bible, because it is a lot of religion in this book. And then, sort of the big events that are going to happen. And this is all just for the sort of the first 30 pages of the book is this part. This is not the most detailed outline I made. I made one more after this. And then to the second one, William, he was the next character I introduced. And then I had a story about meatballs, which ended up not going in the book because my editor thought it was inappropriate. And then the third one, Jacob. And that's just meeting them is the part one. And then part two, I move on. And all of these come from stories that I heard that I loved. The farting dragon is down here. Learning about knights is up here, and what I wanted to show about knights. So that's sort of what this is more like a scene by scene outline looks like, but this is page 3 of 11. So you can see very, very detailed before writing that book.
That's a lot of detail. Yeah, I'm impressed.
I mean, I don't know if it's good or not, but that was what I did.
Fair enough.
Anyway. Miss Brianna, maybe we should go back to your questions because we keep cutting you off. One day you'll
get to I love listening to you guys just talk back and forth. I used to write things in high school, and college got too busy, and since then I have not actually picked up and started writing a story since. So it's very nice to hear you two both talk about how you like to do things, and if you have a question for each other, that's totally fine. I'm going to
you want to say something? Okay.
No, we're never going to let her ask a question, but we're going to get close.
You just said something that I hear so often from people, that they used to write and they had planned to write, they got too busy. And other people who wrote a chapter or 4 chapters and never finished. Um, One thing that I want to say is that writing is not for everyone. If you want to write, that's one thing. But if you don't want to write, that's fine. You know, live your life. This is what you've got. Live it. But writing, I think, is sort of like a disease. Once you get bitten, you can't stop yourself from writing. And I don't know Adam's experience. He said he's been publishing for 10 years. He started saying, I've been writing, and then he said, I've been publishing. I don't know how many years I've been publishing, but I wrote for 13 years before I sold my first story. And anybody who was sane would have stopped. I was not writing for a market. I was writing because I needed to write. And I think that's how it is. Like, many people need to write one book because there's something that's really inside and has to come out. But maybe they don't need to write another one. And not very many people need to write a third. And then, of course, there are the completely imbalanced people like me who just keep going. But I don't think that you, as a person who loves children's literature, or the audience as people who love receiving children's literature, need to feel in any way diminished or ineffectual by not wanting to write. Reading is an active experience. When you're reading, everybody reads a book differently, and your picture of what happened is different, and you've created it. Reading itself is a creative activity.
Well, thank you. That's very nice to hear. Nice to hear that. So one thing I did want to ask, Adam, you mentioned that you struggle the most with the plot. How do you guys create characters? Do they just kind of come to you fully formed? Do you start with the seed and have to work at growing them? How do you guys create characters? What makes a good character, maybe, might be another way of saying that.
So my answer is actually similar to an answer from before, and will just underline how uncreative I am. My best characters are ones who are based on historical personages or characters from fairy tales that are worth exploring. And I feel like my weakest characters are the ones I make up myself. And to some degree, I do that intentionally, not that they're weak. In fairy tales, you may notice, you often know very little about the main character of a fairy tale. Cinderella, what do we know about her? Her stepsisters were really mean to her. She had to clean stuff. What kind of books did she like? We have no idea. What was her favorite color? We have no clue. What did she do in her free time? Well, she didn't really have free time, but if she did, she went and sat under a tree and cried, right? That's all we know about Cinderella. So, and I think that there's a reason for that. Now, I think there are lots and lots of wonderful fairy tale retellings where we flesh out Cinderella and we learn about her, and that's really fascinating. But there is also, I think, important role to be played for fairy tales like that one, where we don't know much about that main character, because that main character becomes a vessel for us, becomes an avatar that we put ourselves into. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a lot of very successful books, series, even movies that do that same thing. I think Harry Potter, we know who Hermione is. She's got a lot of character. Ron has got a lot of character. Snape, amazing character. Who is Harry? He's brave, and he loves his friends. And he has some emotional stuff, but mostly Harry is an empty box that you put yourself into to read those books because you want to live in that world. And so for a lot of my books, I kind of do that, where I fill in less for the main character. In fact, in not a single of my books will you ever know how old my main character is. I've never mentioned the age of a main character. And that's because when I ask a kid, how old do you think the main character is, they always say 1 to 2 years older than them. I say, how old are you? 7. How old do you think that kid is? 8 or 9. Okay, always. So the characters that I like the best, that I write the best, are characters that come from other things. So King Louis IX from Inquisitor's Tale, based on King Louis IX from France, who was, on the one hand, the most wonderful king, the most successful king, the most loving king, who also hated Jews and hated Muslims and led an awful, ruinous war in the Crusades. How could he be both of those things? That's something that's really interesting to me and something that I wanted to explore. And in this book, like the devil is my favorite character, because in my version of the devil is like funny and quirky and has a lot of contradictions, but it's kind of easier to think of that if it's a character that I'm inheriting as opposed to creating.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think that I write 2 kinds of stories. One are stories in which, like fairy tales, where the plot is given to you and very little is known about the character, really. And I develop the character so that as you move from one point in the plot to the next point in the plot, the character's personality will wind up tightening the screws. So if there's something in the plot that is sad, I'll make their personality such that given that event, it's tragic. Or if there's something frightening, I'll make it so that given their personality, it's terrifying. I wanna up it all the time. So in that way, I do create characters. But I have other stories in which I start with a character, and this character goes forward, needing to go forward to do X or Y or Z, and where those people come from, I don't know. Yeah, one day I was walking down the street and I heard a little voice in my head, and I knew it was like a 10-year-old boy, and he was talking to himself and he seemed like he was insane. And then it turned out he was talking to his freckles, his favorite freckles on his knees, and they were talking to him. And where that character came from, I have zero idea. It just kind of happened. But then his very rich inner life just led to everything. I have a very rich inner life. I grew up very inward. I would climb trees with a book and sit there and read for hours.
It sounds dangerous to climb a tree while holding a book.
Well, you stick the book inside your shorts. In those days, shorts had all elastic, and it was just very easy to stick it inside.
I also have a very rich inner life, and I did as a kid, and it reminds me of what you were saying, Donna Jo, when you were talking about not everybody having a right. We all have different ways of sort of expressing that. I mean, I think my mom was a brilliant mother, because when I got home from school every day, I was not expected to do my homework. I was expected to go and play, not watch TV, not play video games. I just went and played for about 3 hours, and then we had dinner. And then after dinner, I was supposed to get my homework done, which usually meant my homework did not get finished. But what it did mean was that I was developing not only like strong imagination muscles, right? When you're imagining for hours, you get good at doing it. maintaining a story in your head, creating characters, remembering where this character is while this character is doing something else. It's like muscles. I mean, it's like doing different kinds of exercises. You strengthen your back, you strengthen your arms, your shoulders, your legs. The more you imagine, the different types of imagination get strengthened. I would love to see, I've never heard of like sort of a diagramming one's imagination muscles the way one diagrams one's body muscles, but I think it could sort of be done. And I didn't know for the longest time that writing was how I wanted to express that imagination. I did know I wanted to use the imagination. I remember very clearly I was maybe, I don't know, 9 or something, and I asked my father, Papa, do you still imagine? And he said, well, I think about what's going to happen at work the next day and sort of think about, you know, how it might go. And I was like, that is not the same thing. And I swore to myself at that moment that I would never stop imagining. But I didn't know how I wanted to, and I didn't even remember as I got older that had mattered to me so much. So I acted a lot as a kid, in school shows and stuff, and that feels like imagining, because what I'm doing is taking words on a page, as Donna Jo said, at the script, and I'm imagining that character and trying to bring that character to life, which also really helps for writing. And then I went and taught, which is essentially imagining with a group of children for 20 children for hours and hours a day. But it turned out that I needed to go back emotionally, needed to go back to those like hours and hours a day where I was by myself, moving characters around and processing my world. And writing has allowed me to do that better than anything. So I haven't always needed to physically write, but I've always needed to interpret the world through play and imagination.
Play is serious work, and Adam's absolutely right. Children need play. When schools, who knows what's going to happen with schools, but through the decades that I've been watching schools, when funding went down, like in 2008, the first things to be cut were playful things, a lot of athletics and stuff like that, which is really a dreadful shame. You learn an enormous amount of things from play, imaginative things, but also cooperation and strategy. And play is serious work.
And really important. I agree.
All right. I do have a little challenge for both you and the entire audience to do. We have a character creation challenge, if that's okay. And then I'm going to open it up for the audience to ask us questions.
I just said that character creation is my weakness, Miss Brianna.
I know.
Just said I was bad at this.
We'll do our best. It's not very big. So I'm going to actually share my screen. I have a little picture here. So I would like everybody, including the audience, and the audience will get a chance to share their characters, if you would like. I have a pair of well-worn hiking boots here, and I would appreciate it if everyone would take about 2 minutes, maybe 3, to create a character that would own these shoes. And from your character, we have talked about how you don't necessarily need to know your character's favorite color or their favorite food or something, but here's 3 prompts. I would like it if you would tell me your character's favorite food, what they like to do for fun, and something that they don't like, and anything else you would like to tell us about them. Personally, I would like to hear what genre of story they're in, but you could include a job, a pet, their best friend, anything you think that this character that owns these shoes would have. And I will say I have done this previously. Back when I was in high school, I was taking a writing course, and I came up with a short story based on shoes just like this. So,
are you going to share yours then? Your character?
I can share my old character. I was going to create a new one, but
create a new one.
I can share my old character as well. So I will. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. It's 10:44. I'll give everybody 3 minutes. I'll give everybody 3 minutes until 10:47. To just think about who would own these shoes and what would this person be like. And then if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, you can draw them if you really feel like drawing. I am a terrible drawer, but we'll let that go. Can I share some music? you guys hear music? I don't think I can share a screen and share music. I don't think it's going to work. So. All right, it is 10:47. That was your 3 minutes. You may keep working if you so desire. And since this is my challenge, I will go first, and then you guys can share what you created if you would like. I decided that since they were a well-worn pair of shoes, that this was a person who likes to go hiking every single weekend. So that's their main hobby. And they like to fish. So their favorite food is fish. So when they go out hiking, they like to finish with the fishing and cooked what they caught for the day. They don't like dogs because they find them typically too hyper, although that's probably just because those are the dogs they've met. I know there's lots of dogs that aren't hyper. And I think that they are a rather tall person, but they're a little on the plumper side because they sit at a desk all day dealing with people as the secretary. But their story is going to be a fantasy story. They find something in the woods that they weren't expecting, that they didn't think existed. So that's my character.
Exciting. I want to hear that story. I'm ready.
I came up with something very discouraging, and I'm sorry, I can't help it. The shoes felt masculine to me. And I have a scene in my head where these young men, boys, have taken off their clothes and gone swimming in the river. And the people of the village blow them up. They have been pillaging the village, and a boy comes across the shoes, and his life will really be much better if he takes those shoes, and does he? And so that's where I am. I have a very twisted mind.
No, that's totally fine. That's interesting.
So is it like a war-torn world or something that they're
It's, maybe it's sort of Syria, maybe, I don't know.
My idea was a boy who I think I've called Simon. And these are his moms. I saw them as women's hiking boots, but who knows? These are his mom's hiking boots. And yesterday was the day that Simon and his mom were the same height. Remember, it's a big deal for a boy when you're the same height as your mom. And Simon likes video games. It's what he does all day long. His mom is a archaeologist, and he doesn't really like talking about her or her work, even though everyone thinks it's so interesting. And the next day he wakes up and sees his mom's muddy hiking boots sitting outside their door, and she's gone. And he decides to put on the hiking boots because they fit him finally. And he's going to go after her into the wilderness where she's been excavating and see what has happened to her and what she's excavated, and maybe if he could get her back.
Both of those stories sound like really great stories that I would want to read. All right, anyone in our audience, if you would like to share your character creation, if you can figure out how to raise your hand, that will let me allow you to talk, and then you can join us up here in front. You don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to. Or if you want to just type it in the chat, that would also be acceptable. Well,
A lot of shy people.
oh, there's one.
All right.
There's one. Allow to talk. Becca, if you would like to share what you thought, that would be great.
Right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't get very far, but what I had was that they belong to a ranger who has lived most of her life as a hermit. She saved up her gold for many years to buy these shoes because her old ones always kept dying. So she takes very, very good care of them, cleaning, oiling, polishing, so they will last a long time for her. Her favorite food is a hearty steak. She loves to spend days at a time in the woods, where she lives quite close to nature as well, with her cats. And one of her favorite things to do is to climb trees and spend time in the trees. And she still has that childlike, not childish thrill of climbing a tree and being up high and having that secret spot where the people down below can't see you and you can see everything.
Very nice.
Oh, sounds like a lovely story. Also, Becca, you should write it, and then you should definitely record the audiobook, because I love your accent and your voice. I'm ready for the whole thing.
Thank you.
I'm going to mute you again, Becca. Does anybody else want to share what they created? All right, Robert, allow you to talk. Oh,
Okay, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay. The food of my character, this is an older teenager, is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He likes to...
Oopsies, I did the wrong person. I'm sorry, hang on. I was trying to get Becca off. Go ahead, Robert, try again.
I can't take the suspense.
I'm sorry, Robert. Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so my character is a older teenager. He likes butter and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. He likes to hike off trail, hence the boots. He doesn't like swimming. He's a teenager thinking about life and not sure what to do, but I'm pretty sure he's not really into college or career as yet, and really doesn't want to grapple with that. And he knows he's not a writer, but he could act, but he's kind of too interior oriented not to reveal that. He does have a pal who likes hiking and wants to explore more in distant places. And I would say that this becomes into a quest novel, but the horizon is evolving slowly. So the distant place is like maybe 40 miles away, and then becomes more and more as people foray out, or the two guys foray out. But I haven't fleshed out the characters yet.
I mean, we got 3 minutes. It's fine.
No,
If you
that's
don't
it.
have anything more, that's totally fine.
No,
That's
it.
good.
Promising.
All right, we have one here in the chat. Stacy says her character is the one who takes care of the damage done to characters who were in fairy tales. So whatever happened to the royal subjects of Sleeping Beauty? What were the long-term after effects for sleeping that long? She loves foraging for wild asparagus and mushrooms, thus the hiking boots, and loves traveling, but doesn't like people who only think about themselves. All right, we've heard from several people. If you want to share again, you're certainly welcome to, but I'm going to open it up for audience questions, and we have had one sitting here for a while. Somebody asked, yes, absolutely, Donna. Give us more of your knowledge.
All three of these, Becca and Robert and Stacy, first of all, congratulations on being brave enough to put yourself forward. If you're going to be a writer, you have to develop thick skin and big ears. Thick skin so that you will not be hurt by comments that you are made on your work. You want to be grateful for them, and big ears so that you can actually hear them. So that's wonderful. And all of you had a little tiny kernel for the start of a story in there, which is really nice.
The question we've had sitting here for a while, they asked, what was your favorite book that you've written?
Do you have one, Donna Jo?
It's like asking who's your favorite child. It's very difficult, but I do, in fact, have a book I love most. It's called Breath, and it did not do very well, but I wrote it because I needed to. The main character has cystic fibrosis, and it's the Pied Piper of Hamelin story, but it's about the child who's trying to figure out what on earth is making everybody in the town die. And he has a particular perspective on everything because his whole life people have expected him to die because he's the guy with the salty skin. It's cystic fibrosis is in different people in his family, and most kids in that time in that place who had it died by the age of 8. And I love that book, and I love that character, Breath.
Yeah, as Donna Jo said, I don't have a favorite. You know, it's funny. I've only got one child, and I don't even have a favorite one of those. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, you love them all for different reasons. They do different things for you when you write them, and also afterwards. So I love The Inquisitor's Tale because of the richness of the folklore and the history that I got to explore. I love the Grimm books, A Tale Dark and Grim, and In a Glass Grimly, and The Grim Conclusion, because of just the funny, hilarious, weird fairy tales that I got to play with. And I love the Unicorn Rescue Society because I get to learn so much from the writers that I'm working with. So Emma Otegi, as we talked about, David Bowles, who's the Mexican-American author. We worked on book 4 together, Chupacabras of the Rio Grande. Book 3, I co-wrote with Joseph Bruchac, an incredible Native American storyteller.
Yeah, he's
Isn't
wonderful.
Joe amazing? I heard him tell a story of a Native American fairy tale at a reading conference 10 years ago. And I was like, that guy is one of the best storytellers I've ever heard, if I ever could work with him. And then so he was the first person I called up for Unicorn Rescue Society, and he was incredible to work with. We wrote a book called Sasquatch and the Muckleshoot. And right now I'm working with somebody named Hannah Khan, who a wonderful Pakistani American author who wrote Amanah's Voice. And I just learned so much for each book from these other authors. So you love them all for different reasons.
All right, does the audience have any more questions? Feel free to raise your hand and talk. You can type it in, whichever you want. Now I got to give a little bit of silence so people have time to type. I actually do have a question for Donna. I, while I was kind of researching to figure out what I was going to ask today, although apparently I didn't need to because you guys can talk forever if you want. I really enjoyed listening. I found out, Donna, you have written several books for deaf and hard of hearing. I took ASL, a couple of years of ASL in college. I don't have anyone to practice it with, so my skills are very rusty. I can do the alphabet and that's about it now. But I was just curious why you started writing those. Is that process any different from writing other novels? How does that work?
Actually, I'm sorry to disabuse you. I don't write stories for deaf or hard of hearing children. I work in a large project with a professor at Gallaudet University, Jean Myris. We are partners, collaborators on this. And with our students, we produce ebooks and YouTubes for deaf children, stories for deaf children. But all of the storytellers in our books are deaf people for whom a sign language is their most comfortable language. And Jean's in my part. Jean is deaf, and Jean used to work in the National Theater of the Deaf, and I am hearing, and but I write stories for children, so that's how we came together and made friends. We guide the students in choosing the stories, in revising the stories so that they, if they are a classical story, so that they are suitable for the deaf experience and the deaf body. And we do an awful lot of technical work producing these stories. If anybody's interested, we have a website. All of our stories are free. You can just download them. And right now we are on a huge project making stories that explain the coronavirus to deaf children all around the world. We have many countries involved. We're working with over 20 sign languages and texts and all those different countries' languages. Our website is called Rise eBooks. If you just look for RISE, Rise eBooks, and Rise stands for Reading Involves Shared Experience. The deaf children often are, most of the time, 90-something% of the time, are born into hearing families. And often people don't tell stories with them because they're people who their parents may love to tell stories, but they don't feel comfortable in a sign language doing it. And certainly if you do it in a spoken language, you might not have a good experience for the child. So we do these stories in such a way as to make them as encouraging and welcoming to people who are non-signers as possible. There are signs in the stories, but there's an awful lot of what's called the visual vernacular, which can pull anybody in. I mean, if you just watch one of the stories, you will love it. And if you read, you will then be able to make connections between, you know, that word and that sign. We love doing it.
Tell us the website again, so we can go to the website.
What's that, dear?
Tell us the website where these are available again.
Okay. So,
Should be that, right? Rise eBooks over in the chat.
Rise eBooks. Oh, I can put it in the chat. Okay.
Yes. Make sure you're doing to all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists.
Okay. Wait a second. Let me try to do that. So I go to chat. I put in all panelists. And type my message here. Did that work?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, and I feel like it's the most important thing. Well, as a professional thing, it's the most important thing I've done with my life.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I got involved in it because I visited a deaf school. And when you think about trying to learn to read in a language that you can't hear, the alphabetic system doesn't help you at all. So cat and bat are completely separate words. They have nothing in common.
Right.
You just have to learn them separately. To read 4,000 words, you have to learn 4,000 words, as opposed to read 4,000 words and you've got an alphabetic system, you have to learn 26 letters and various ways to
I've never thought about
do
that.
it.
You know,
Yeah, so reading, and you meet any deaf person who's literate, have a lot of respect for them. They've worked hard.
amazing.
Mark has asked, what's the hardest part of writing a funny book?
You know, you hope it's funny. I mean, you write things that you can never plan to write a funny book, in my opinion, right? You write, and if the characters' way they talk to each other is funny, then it's funny. If you have funny ideas about what you're writing, so one of the things I like to do in my books is, especially in the Grimm books, there is a narrator who talks to the reader and comments on what's happening, and that's just got to be like, because you're seeing something and it's ridiculous, and so you comment on it. So the hardest thing is after you write it, what I always do is I go back and I reread my books out loud a number of times. And if I'm not laughing out loud at my own jokes, then they're not good enough for you. But, sometimes you write a joke and you laugh out loud at it, and other people are like, oh, I don't know what you were thinking. So it's essentially faith is the hardest part of writing a funny book for me. Faith that other people find funny what you do.
I want to underscore something that Adam just said. He said he reads his stories out loud. I actually write my stories out loud. I think that you've got your ear. Your ear is very trained. How it got trained, it doesn't matter. Your ear is trained. You know a ton of things, and use it. If you read your own things, you will make them much better on your own.
I'll fill in for you as whatever's going on in the background. So if you read them silently, your eye and your mind completes all the things that aren't there, fixes problems. Whereas your ear, because as Donna Jo was saying, you are used to receiving from the outside and judging it. Is that person interesting? Do I like that person? Then your ear is very finely attuned to the nuances of language. And if you hear what you've written out loud, you say, well, that sounds off. That makes me feel weird. That really made me laugh. So yeah, reading it out loud or having somebody read it to you if you're lucky enough, or even, anything you can do to hear it.
Any more questions from our audience? Technically, we're past 11 o'clock, so we're officially over, but I'm willing to sit here and keep chatting. So if you have any other questions, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, I'll just give it a couple of seconds while people type. The awkward silence while you wait for people to type is always like.
It's okay. I'm just thinking about all the things that Donna Jo said and trying to remember
Right?
them, so I make sure that I'm ready to write tomorrow.
Right?
I'm getting to know you in this way, Adam. I've really enjoyed this.
It is. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll find another way to continue these conversations. I would like that. And I'll pay you. Okay. Oh, well, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you, Miss Brianna. Thank you, Donna Jo.
I have had a lot of fun sitting and listening to you guys talk to each other and answer our questions. You guys are so passionate about what you do, and this has been really fun.
Me too.
So thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I already said everything at the beginning about all the stuff that's coming up. So if you would like to join any of the other stuff we have coming up, even if you two want to sit and listen to Renee talk, you're certainly welcome to sign up. We've had several comments that we all love your books. Adam, I'm actually in the middle of Tall, Dark, and Grim, and I love the narrator. I've got several reasons why I love that narrator. So
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have been here, guys. And I think that's all for us today. Oh, we have one last question sneaked in. Mark wanted to ask, what is the hardest book that you wrote? We'll make this one the last question. So what is the hardest book that you wrote?
For me, it was definitely The Inquisitor's Tale, because it was, 6 years of research and trying to get it right. But, as is sometimes said, the hardest book is always the one you're working on right now. So right now I feel totally lost and befuddled. So it feels the hardest.
My hardest book is called Fierce as a Lion, Tender as the Evening Star. And I've been working on it forever, and I don't know if it will ever get published. I wrote it as a novel. I came across Akbar, the third Mughal emperor of India, wrote it as a novel, and was told that I was not allowed to write a novel about Afghanistan or India because I am not Afghani or Indian. But I'm in love with this character, and I wrote it many different ways, trying to make it better. I figured if it was good enough, people could look past my mongrel Mediterranean blood and see the story. And now somebody told me write it as a graphic novel, then you can get paired with an Indian illustrator or whatever. And I tried that. I have done one graphic novel. I did a novel with David Wiesner, and that was so much fun. But it didn't work for me that way. So now I'm writing it in verse. And I have never written a novel in verse, but I've written many picture books, which I consider to be verse. And I also write poetry for adults. And so I'm trying, and it's very hard for me, and I am so in love with this character. He is the reason why India, even though today we think of India as having so many problems, in India you've got Hindus and Muslims and Jews and Christians, and you have a lot of mix. You don't have that mix all across Southeast Asia. You don't. And the reason you have that mix is because of Akbar, because of how he wanted his empire to be. He was a completely open-minded guy, and I'm in love with him.
Well, I hope your book gets published.
I hope so too.
I hope that somehow works out for you. All right, that was our last question. Once again, thank you so much, and we will be done.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
You too.